All right.
Hi, Dylan. Thank you for coming out for the lecture. And first of all, how are you today?
I'm doing great. It's Teachers' Day, so I'm getting a lot of kind messages from students. It's happy, and it's Friday.
So the other day, I was observing your class, and I realized that you are teaching the parts of essays. And I was surprised to find out that this information is exactly what our students need, because we teach quite almost identical material when we teach how to approach CSAT material. So I thought that it would be great beneficiary for our students to share or teach this information about the essay paragraph. So thank you for coming up for your lecture. And so you might begin now.
All right. So as Mr. Hyunpil said, this is part of a series that we're going through with the English majors about writing an essay. This specifically is going to be moving into the introduction paragraph. So we started at the body paragraph, and then we're going to introduction, and then we'll do conclusion later. But let's go ahead and start learning about how to write a good introduction paragraph. So first of all, if you can write a normal body paragraph in an essay, you can do an introduction paragraph. Every body paragraph is going to have a couple parts. It's going to start off with a topic sentence. After the topic sentence, you're going to have some type of evidence. We'll call these supporting details. Supporting sentences. These will be your examples and your explanations that prove that your topic is correct. The topic is the main point of that paragraph. And then it's going to end with a concluding sentence. So these are the main parts of any type of basic body paragraph. When you're writing the introduction for an essay, if you can do a good job at writing a body paragraph, you can write a really, really good introduction. So this is kind of analogous to an introduction paragraph. You have a body right here. The topic sentence would essentially be the same thing as the first part of the introduction. You're going to have general statements. You're going to have thesis statement. Those are your main point. That's your topic in the body paragraph. That's what it's kind of connected to. The supporting sentences that you use that make up the most part of the body paragraph, those or of the paragraph, those would be related to body paragraph A, body paragraph B, body C of a full essay. And then lastly, your concluding sentence from the body paragraph, it's going to be related to the conclusion. You'll do the exact same thing of summarizing either the topic sentence or the thesis of your essay. So, whenever you are writing an essay, don't get intimidated by it. An essay is basically the same as just one big paragraph. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide.
Sorry for interruption, Dylan. Hold on. So before, could you show your memo again?
Maybe.
So before we move anywhere further, this is exactly why I asked Mr. Dylan to come out to explaining about the structure of passage. Because I realized that many Korean students, when we approach the CSAT material, they tend to approach this material word by word or sentence by sentence, meaning that many students, they don't approach from an entire cohesion perspective of these passages. Most of CSAT passages, they have structure. They have one cohesive structure. So when you read a one word, when you read a one sentence from CSAT passage, you always have to approach that word and sentence from the framework of this entirety, from the framework of this cohesion. That definitely help you to understand more specific meaning and more specific interpretation of the information of the passage. So I want you to keep this mind, this entire structure, even when you approach the reading passage of the CSAT paragraphs, please.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Understanding the full structure is super useful whenever you're trying to analyze anything. Later, we're going to talk about types of introduction. There's two major types. They will have different information and they'll have different formats and different places for the thesis statement. So if you recognize that something is like a funnel style introduction paragraph, you will know exactly what are the first sentences going to be. Will these be main points? Will these be the thesis statement? Or if you're doing a attention-getting technique, where's the thesis statement for that? Are these first sentences even related to the main points of the rest of the essay? It's a good point.
Thank you.
So we'll go on to the next slide. And we're going to start talking about some more detailed parts of the introduction. So I mentioned a second ago, okay, let's redo that part. How do you erase it all?
Maybe we have to use this erase.
Or maybe, can we click just this? Oh, yeah, just that. Okay. All right, so how am I doing that? There's two main parts. All right, moving on, let's talk about the specific details of the introduction paragraph. Okay. Moving on, let's talk about the specific parts of an introduction paragraph. There's two basic parts for this. Every introduction is going to start with what we call the general statements right here. In middle school, you've probably heard these general statements referred to as a hook. If you don't know right now, the hook is going to be what gets your attention. So it's going to be something interesting, something shocking, some story, some fact, some question that pulls you into the essay. It's not always going to be something like entertaining. It could just be something more academic. But the general statements are the start of your essay. And then after that, you'll get the thesis statement. Everybody is aware of what a thesis statement is. Everybody say it together. Good job. The thesis statement is the main argument. The main argument of your essay. So these two things are going to be inside every introduction paragraph. So starting out, first of all, what are the general statements? General statements are going to introduce the overall idea of the essay. You can think of this kind of like background information. Now, whenever you're doing general information, your general statements, this is just going to be, let's say, small details, but not your arguments. So here you're introducing just the topic. You're going to introduce the main idea of the whole essay. Basically, let's say the theme of the essay. If you're writing an essay about how kittens are cuter than puppies, then you'll start off with some information about kittens. But you will not say yet that I think kittens are cuter than puppies. You'll just start with some basic facts about cats or some basic stories about cats. So we'll talk more about how to write this on the next slide. But as we mentioned, the general statements are also referred to as the hook sometimes. This is something interesting that'll drag you into the discussion. So I write some information about how to do something interesting in the hook. You can do it with interesting facts, but I note what we want to do is if you give interesting facts, also if you ask people a question whenever you're trying to make a hook, you need to also provide some type of explanation. Give an answer to the question. Or give me details to explain the fact. Oftentimes what I see is people will give some type of hook and they'll start with an amazing fact. Did you know when you pick up a rag doll, it's a cat? When you pick up a rag doll, their bodies go limp. You can start with a fact, but we need to use some type of explanation so we can bridge it to our thesis later, so it makes a connection. Same thing with a question. If you ask a question, you should respond to that question. You should give some type of an answer, so that way, once we start the thesis, there's not a sudden cut from general statements to thesis. We want some smooth connection. So let's move on to the thesis. As we said, the main argument of your introduction paragraph, and most likely the most important part of your introduction paragraph. This is your argument. So the thesis statement is going to introduce your main points. It's going to state the specific topic of your essay. Every thesis statement will have two parts. It's going to have the topic, and it's going to have the limiting idea. So in my example about kittens are cuter than puppies, the topic of this, the general idea of my thesis statement, is going to be the same as the general statement. We're talking about kittens. But the limiting idea is going to narrow our argument to something more specific. So we will limit ourselves to reasons why kittens are cuter than puppies. So it will tell us the specific topic of our essay. Next, it may also list the subtopics of your essay. Our thesis statement, kittens are cuter than puppies. That's okay, that's a basic thesis statement, but subtopics are going to be the smaller details about that thesis. So I could write a thesis statement that says, kittens are cuter than puppies because, 1, they are small. They're smaller. 2, they are softer. And 3, they are funnier. Let's just say they're funnier. So your thesis statement can include these small subpoints. You could also make something like, it is important to study hard for 2 reasons. It helps you pass exams and it gives you good grades later. That's a poor thesis, but you can list these subtopics. Generally, it is better to write these subtopics rather than do a basic thesis statement. Now, it can also indicate what pattern of organization your essay is going to use. We won't talk about this much inside this paragraph, but patterns of organization would be logical division of idea. So point 1 separated from point 2, separated from point 3. Or it could be something like compare and contrast. So in this essay, I'm going to compare the cuteness of kittens to the cuteness of puppies. So that essay, that thesis, indicates we will talk about similarities and differences together. Also, it could be chronological. It could be like a process essay. I'm going to explain the process of how a successful person becomes unsuccessful. You would write that inside your thesis statement. It would be baked in, included in your wording, but we will not talk about that in this. Next, it indicates the writer's position or the person's point of view. So not every thesis statement will say, I believe something, but some theses, I don't know the plural for that. Do you know it, Mr. Yumpil?
I have no idea.
We'll have to Google that later.
Right.
Some thesis will say what your topic is, what your position inside the article is. Either you're for something or you're against something, rather than just a main general academic point. And then lastly, the thesis statement is generally the final sentence inside an essay. It's not always the final sentence, but usually it is the last sentence. The next most common thing is to have a thesis statement and then a bridge that will connect it to the next paragraph. So therefore, the thesis would be second to last. But usually, you're safe saying the thesis is the last sentence. Okay, that's all we've got.
Hold on. Sorry for interruption. May I borrow your pen? So I want to add a little bit about more the hook part of the CSAT passage here. So as Mr. Dillon mentioned, when the CSAT passage begins, they normally most of the time begin with some kind of hook to provide the attention, to catch the attention from the readers. So in CSAT materials, some of the most common hook are these four here. So many times they use statistics because people love statistics to persuade something. So we use data to catch attention of the readers, and we use provide other type of evidence about their topic, or we provide like expert opinion about your related topic. Sometimes we just provide plain explanation on the matter. So these are the four common hooks that is used in CSAT, and some of the direction of the passage, as Mr. Dillon mentioned, that in the thesis statement, trying to limit the point, and we have more focus on our argumentation side. So overall, in the CSAT passage, it begins from the small point, and as your logic develop, you talk about broader topic here, and you end up with a broader topic. Or opposite case could be same in terms of directions. You begin from a wide topic, and you narrowing your attention, you narrowing your argumentation at the end, and it wraps up your passage argumentation. Okay?
We will actually be talking about this one right now. So, moving on to the next slide, maybe. So moving on to the next slide, we'll look at an example together really quickly of an introduction paragraph. So we're going to start looking at the general sentences first in this example, and then we'll talk about the thesis statement. Below in the yellow right here, I don't know how clearly you can see it there, but below I have the thesis statements, and then everything above that, these will be the general statements. So I'm going to go ahead and just read this paragraph to you guys because we're going to talk about the parts of it. So the middle school years, grades 6 to 7, are known to be the tough years in school. These are the years when the different rate of girls' and boys' physical, emotional, and cognitive development are most noticeable. Girls develop ahead of boys in every area, and both suffer. Educators debate whether separating boys and girls into single-sex, meaning single-gender, classrooms might improve student academic performance. Single-sex classes were against the law in public schools until several years ago, but now they have become more common. Although some parents, educators, and civil liberties groups continue to oppose single-sex classes, there is some evidence that separating boys and girls in middle school produces positive results. So, this is a good paragraph about should we separate boys and girls into different classes for their education. Let's talk about the general statements. As we said, the general statements are going to introduce the topic of your essay, but it's not going to tell you the main argument, not yet. So we start off, what are we talking about? What are the general statements? We're talking about middle school, first of all. We're talking about the different rate of development for boys and girls in the very beginning. So we know we're going to talk about some type of psychological, emotional, physical development and how it's going to be different between boys and girls. We also learned a little bit of interesting information. Remember, this is a hook. We learned that, oh no, apparently both people suffer, both boys and girls suffer due to this development. So now we want to read more. We've got something interesting to suck us in. Next, we get the thesis statement. We've learned about what the general topic is. Boys and girls, they develop differently. I will also add that it's going to be something about academic performance. But the thesis statement will now tell us exactly what we want to know. We're going to learn the author's position when they say that some people oppose single-sex classrooms, but there is evidence that separating them produces positive results. We learned the author's point of view. Single-sex classrooms are good. They produce good results. Why are they good? They produce good results. So we started with general statements about boys and girls. They develop differently. We got a little bit of background information about the past. And then we move into the thesis, the main arguments of this essay, our points of view, and then the reasons why we believe it. And we'll talk about these in more detail next. Any comments?
Nowadays, when we make a transaction in this part of introductory, in old days, we used to provide clear conjunction word, like however, but nowadays, but now in modern CSAT passages, we are intentionally removing all those conjunction words in order to make it difficult for students to cipher the passage. So just as Mr. Dillon mentioned, that I guess it might be helpful for students if you just keep in mind that in the beginning you have a general statement, and although there is no conjunction word, the sentence naturally move to more focused, more specific area and more clear argumentation of our authors in later stage.
And we'll talk about the structure a little bit more right now. This structure is going to be called the funnel structure. It's what Mr. Hyunpil mentioned just a moment ago. So whenever you are writing an introduction paragraph, there's many ways that you can organize the introduction. One of the most common is going to be called the funnel, and then the other most common is going to be called the attention getter. So funnel would be the first one, and then attention getter would be the second. We'll start first by talking about the funnel introduction for an essay or for an introduction paragraph. A funnel is like a triangle. You pour water into it, and then it gets smaller and smaller until it comes out the end. What is funnel in Korean?
It's called 깔때기. 깔때기.
깔때기.
And do you oftentimes use funnel in your real life?
I don't think of the reason. 깔때기?
It's fair enough.
That's close enough.
Yes.
So the funnel style introduction, as you start wide, you get narrower as you go. So this makes sense logically when you think, what is a funnel? You're going to start your essay with broad topics, broad general statements. You'll start with general statements that don't give too much detail about the specific argument you're going to make. It just starts off with the topic, the main idea of your essay, and then it's going to get more and more and more specific as you go down to the thesis. So if we look at the paragraph we just read about boys and girls separating them in school, we start here at the very beginning. The middle school years for grades 6, 7, 8, those are the tough years because people develop differently. So what are we doing inside these first sentences? The only thing we mention, again, are tough years. We mention boys and girls. We mention their development is different. But that's all we get. This is a very, very, very broad topic. If you read this paragraph, if you read this sentence, you cannot necessarily predict what is the point of the essay. You just know the introduction. It's about boys and girls developing differently. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Should we separate them? Should we keep them together? We don't know yet. But as we move down to the second sentences, we will get a little bit more detail. We learn that there is a debate about this. Is it good to keep them together? We learn about the history and that in the past, it was against the law. So now we know that there is some type of conflict about the separation. And this has moved us closer to the thesis. We started with just boys and girls develop differently, but that might not be a good thing to separate them all the time. Should we separate them? Is it a good thing? Some people say yes, some people say no. And then we get the final sentence. We get the thesis. The author is going to state their opinion about this stuff up here, and it will line up the arguments for the rest of the essay. Now, some information about the funnel. You're starting broad, and then you get more and more and more detailed. If you are writing an introduction paragraph and you use a funnel style introduction, this is best for any type of academic or professional, any type of academic or professional essay. The next one we learn about, you can use it more for opinion-based essays, but this one is best because it's focused on clarity. It's very clear what is the thesis statement. It's very clear what is the topic of this. When we contrast it later with the attention-getting introduction style, you will see that the funnel is focused more on moving from one idea to the next in more and more and more detail. Before we move on?
Oh, so in summary, when we say the funnel introduction is maybe the one of the most common structure that's used in argumentatory persuasive passage. So what you might remember is we begin wide and try to focus and get a more focused and detailed argumentation to the end of the funnel structure. And still we are at the introduction section of the passages. Okay?
So we're still at the introduction. Our thesis statement, which we will talk about later, it will give us some details about the body paragraphs, but for now, we're not at that point. Next. Okay. So this is another example of a funnel style introduction. Remember, we're going to start broad, and then we're going to get more detailed as we go. So this is about health. When it comes to health, there are few areas that one can control more than diet and exercise. So we should be broad. What are we talking about? We're talking about health. They mention diet and exercise, but that's all they really mention. We know the main category of this essay, nothing more. Should we only diet, or is diet more important than exercise? Or should we completely stop? You cannot predict the main point until you read farther. While exercise is encouraged in public schools through physical education classes, diet is too often overlooked. So now we have gotten more precise in what we are describing. We talk about, we do diet in public school, but what we do not do is exercise. Or sorry, switch that. Exercise is encouraged inside public schools, but we don't really pay attention to the diet. So now we've introduced, this is kind of a conflict, and we've moved from just diet and exercise to we are doing one, but not the other. In fact, most schools across the United States stock their vending machines with unhealthy options like chips and sugary beverages. So we're getting more and more detail specifically about diet right here. More information. We will end with the thesis, to promote healthy lifelong habits, junk food should be banned from public schools. So we now have the author's opinion. Junk food should be banned. We know what the main point of this essay is going to be, especially those known to contribute to the obesity epidemic. We have limited ourselves now to one very, very, very particular topic. So we started at the top. We just mentioned generally health. That's all we mention, a sentence or two for that. But then we get more specific and we say, well, we are not dieting in school. So people exercise, but they're not dieting. We've gotten more detailed about health. And then last, we end with our thesis statement. I'll just write thesis here. And we learn specifically what about health, what about dieting in school will we talk about in the essay. We are going to talk about banning those foods. It is necessary because those foods in schools are contributing to obesity. So this is an example of a funnel.
Thank
Anything?
you. And I don't have anything to add more on the theory, but by looking at this word here, it reminds me of a joke. So Mr. Dillon, computers. Okay. Computers have their own favorite food. Do you know what computers' favorite food is?
Is it going to be like microchips?
Exactly, yes. It is microchips. Computer love microchips here. And also, speaking of food, you like corn, Dylan?
I do.
Okay, so So we have Mama Corn and Baby Corn. One day, Mama Corn and Baby Corn, they went out for a walk.
Okay.
And suddenly, Mama Corn is wondering where her husband is. So you know what Mama Corn says to Baby when she's wondering where her husband is?
She says, when she's wondering where her husband is, she says...
To Baby. What does she say to Baby? Where is your popcorn?
Oh my God.
Mama asks, hey, where is your popcorn?
Pop is another word for father.
Exactly. Yes.
So where's the popcorn?
Yes. So also, I've learned this one quite recently. Here. Oh, it's quite poor drawing, but Dylan, can you guess what this is?
It's a Korean.
No. This is a
Scarecrow.
Exactly.
Scarecrow.
Yes,
Scarecrow.
thank you. This is a scarecrow. So one day, Scarecrow received an award. Why? Why did Scarecrow receive an award one day?
Because I bet because he's upstanding.
Oh, he's upstanding. He's outstanding in his own field. That's why he got a reward. Oh, great. One last one. You know skeleton, right?
Yeah.
Skeleton. Skeletons, they never get to fight against each other. Why? Why does skeleton never get to fight against each other? Why?
Because they never get to fight each other because they're...
Skeletons.
I don't know.
They don't have guts.
Oh, they don't have
Skeletons.
guts. Those
they
are only
don't have
bones.
guts. Yes, they only have bones. And just for a student, like, have guts. It's like a phrasal verb, like something like
courage or bravery.
Yes, exactly. So yes.
So they don't fight because they have no guts. They're skeleton. Guts are like inside your body.
All right, one last one.
Okay.
One last one. Sorry. Dylan, do you remember how many letters do you have in English alphabet?
26.
26. I only know 25, and I don't know why.
Okay.
I only know 25 letters in English, and I don't know why.
He doesn't know why.
Yes, thank you so much. Excellent.
I have one.
Oh.
I created this. Mr. Hyunpil already knows it. Mr. Hyunpil, what is an American's favorite soup?
Oh, me cook.
Yeah.
American's favorite cook is me cook.
Ta-da!
That's funny. Good one, Mr. Dylan. Me cook.
I made that.
Great, Dylan.
All right.
Moving on.
Yeah. So, funnel example finished. Now we'll talk about the second most common type of introduction. This one, if you're writing, this is probably also the easier one to write about as well. It's called the attention getter. Now, everybody knows New Jeans. You got me looking for attention. Like that. That's what this paragraph is going to be about. So the attention-getting introduction is meant to get somebody's attention. It's meant to attract them and pull them in to your essay. The funnel technique, you can also create something interesting to grab somebody's attention, but it is more focused on organization, while this one is more focused on really trying to sell somebody an idea. The organization will be a little bit less than the funnel style. But whenever you are writing the attention-getting introduction, what you're doing is you're developing your hook more. The hook. We talked about this earlier. It's going to be what pulls the reader in. This is the general statements. When you begin the attention-getting paragraph, there's a couple common things that people use. Usually, it will start with something like a dramatic story, where you tell something about, oh my God, a long time ago there was a knight and he was killing dragons and then one of those dragons became real. Something like that. Just something crazy to pull them in. Make sure though, it's going to be connected to the thesis later. Or you would start with a surprising fact, something that shocks the reader. You could say something like, what's a surprising fact? Did you know my cat, Ollie? I have a rag doll named Ollie. Ollie's very fat. Whenever you pick up a rag doll, their body just goes limp. So people read that and they're like, wow, really? Ragdolls just go limp whenever you pick them up. But remember, if you are using a fact to start your introduction, you should also explain it. So I would say something like, this is because for some reason they're genetically predisposed to losing their balance whenever you pick them up. So I would explain it a little bit. And again, you can also add questions here. You can ask an interesting question and provide an answer for that inside the attention getter. Or lastly, the second most common one would be to provide some type of historical information. This could be some type of historical story, something that happened in the past that was really shocking, or it could just be background information about the topic that you're going to discuss. The main point is, though, you are trying to make it something very, very, very interesting. You're trying to pull the reader in. So we mentioned organization a second ago. The funnel strategy is very, very organized because you always know it will start with a broad subject and then you'll go down to the last part of the thesis statement. You'll get more narrow. But the attention getter is not necessarily focused on getting your attention, or sorry, not necessarily focused on organization. Since it's trying to get attention, it's mainly seeking to affect what the reader feels in order to pull them in. You would use this for some type of opinion. So if your teachers asked you to write a position essay where you say, I think A is better than B, you could use an attention getter. Now, when you start with something like a story, the story will have a beginning, middle, and an end, right? So you will be doing beginning, middle, end of the story, and then you will have a thesis statement. So it's not going to be as clear as just a funnel style. There might be a lot of information in the beginning that seems like that could be a thesis, that could be a thesis, but you will not know until you arrive at the very end. So don't use this style if you are doing any type of professional or academic writing. You may see this on the CSAT, but for you guys specifically, keep it clear. Next, this final part, you guys don't have the book, so you're not going to do this.
So lastly, in brief summary, Mr. Dylan introduced us some of the most common strategy that you can begin your essays in introduction section. And what I want you to remember is that the passages that you will encounter in many times in your CSAT material always have a logical structure. So you need to try approach this structure with the framework of the cohesion. So remember that each individual word and sentences, they need to have connected closely each other, and they have each specific roles and functions in these passages. So, and I guess we will try to divide section into more smaller part and try to introduce different sections further in the separate time this time. But for this time, thank you, Mr. Dylan, for coming out and giving a great lecture here. Yeah. And I'm sure that it will definitely help our students.
Yeah. Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe to my channel. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter. If you want to join my Kickstarter or my Patreon, blah, 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 blah.
Or you can write your address here.
No, I don't know any of that.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.